name is Rachel Riegner, and I'm pleased to introduce Leigha McReynolds. Leigha is a PhD candidate in the English department. She has also taught with the WID program for 6 years in the business school, primarily with a course called Business Administration. And as the lead GA of that course, or the lead graduate student in that course, Leigha really led the revampment of the curriculum to focus on writing. And so she knows the writing curriculum in this course and in the business school really, really well, which is why I've invited her to do this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Leigha, and she's going to talk for a bit, and then we'll chat with each other.
So, as Rachel mentioned, I'm talking today about writing in the disciplines in the business writing context. And to give you a little bit of context for the talk I'm going to give, I'm going to talk about the culminating assignment of the class I teach, which is Business Administration 2003W, Analysis of Business Issues. And this class is set up so that the students of the class meet once a week with a professor who introduces them to business concepts, and then meet once a week with a graduate teaching assistant who encourages their writing and critical thinking skills through their engagement with those concepts in a variety of activities and written assignments. So the final project or paper that the students do in the class is a company analysis, and as I go through talking about this, you'll see the instructions the students are given for the assignment on the screen. The purpose of this assignment is for students to do an original research project. They choose a company, research that company, and then when they write their analysis, the analysis is directed with a question of investment. They're asked to recommend whether or not a hypothetical investor would invest or not in this company. And for purposes that I'll talk about a little bit later, we ask them to direct their essay towards an uninformed reader, so someone who is educated but not financially literate. We're hoping that the students will develop a number of skills through this paper, research, of course, the ability to make and support an argument, which is something that we stress throughout the semester, communication skills, which are of course important in any writing class, and then unique to the class as a business writing class, we're hoping that they will develop specifically skills of synthesis and the ability to think systemically about organizations, and the concepts they've been learning throughout the class that they apply in this paper work towards those goals. So we approach the paper in sections. We do teach it by section in order to emphasize the different purposes and the different conventions of each section, and so that students understand they're doing different types of writing and different types of analysis even within one report. I'm going to present the sections to you in the order in which we teach them and in which we have the students write them, but the format order, the order in which the students are supposed to submit the report at the end, is on the screen behind me. The first section that we go over with the students is qualitative analysis. So the qualitative analysis section asks the students to take a holistic view of the company and consider the whys of the company performance. So what are the intangible aspects of the company, the non-financial aspects of the company that help explain the company's overall health, that allow the students to create a narrative about the company. In order to push them towards analysis, they are required to use analytic frameworks that are introduced in the business class. And those frameworks are, for the purposes of this semester, strategy, company culture, stakeholder theory, risk analysis, value propositions, and leadership. And the reason we ask them to use those frameworks is because the student's tendency is to simply put information on the page and assume that information by itself says something about the company. And not that it doesn't, but we want to push them through to the analysis part of it. We want them to tell us not just the information, but why that information matters, what it says about the company they're researching. They're required to use non-company sources, so sources that come from outside of the company's publication, so that their report can be objective and broad-reaching. And in order to give them the skills to do that, we actually have a library day where the business librarian introduces them to business-specific databases. Many of these students are never exposed to that during their undergraduate career, and so that's very helpful. We do require them to do some process work for this section. First, we give them a research worksheet. So before they're allowed to write anything about the company, we try to force them to look at the company in broad-reaching terms across a variety of issues so they then can decide what's important and what's not. And we teach this section first because most of our students, their tendency, if we were just to say, give me a recommendation about a company, they would go straight to financial data. And while financial data is definitely important, we try to stress that qualitative data is equally important, partly because you can't really understand why quantitative data represents the things it does if they don't understand the qualitative choices that are behind that data. And so the second thing we discussed with them is their quantitative analysis. This section asks students to write about numbers. It asks them to analyze the implications of the financial data the companies provide. And students face a few unique struggles in working on this section, and we focus on those in our instruction. Students struggle to write for an uninformed audience. Most business students at the sophomore level are financially literate to the point that they can use the concepts we work with in the financial analysis. They're not financially literate to the point that they can explain those concepts to someone else, and so we push them to develop those skills in this section. The other thing students struggle with is that they tend to include graphs and charts and then not analyze those graphs and charts, not actually write about them. They treat those as providing information separate from any work that they do as writers. And we really tried to get them to flip that assumption. We want them to prioritize the texts that's written and then have the visuals be a supplement to that. And then finally, similarly to the qualitative analysis, students really struggle with pushing through to the actual analysis part of this section. They want to just present the numbers. They assume that numbers as facts speak for themselves. But really, we push them through to explain why these numbers are the way they are, why it matters, how they compare to the industry or to competitors, and what that says about the company's health. We also require process work for this section. So before students even turn in a draft of the paper, they have already attempted to analyze one or a few financial indicators and received feedback from their instructor, specifically helping them work through the struggles that I just mentioned. So once the students are equipped to write the bulk of the report, the analysis sections, we then teach them how we want them to introduce the report. So the introduction serves the purpose of all introductions to introduce the content that comes after. We do ask our students to develop a few key skills in this particular version of the introduction. One is to make a clear statement of purpose. Purpose is something that we emphasize from the beginning of the course all the way through, and students still at the end of the class really struggle to clearly and concisely articulate the purpose of why they're writing, both for themselves and for the reader. Another skill we ask them to develop is road mapping, so getting used to telling the reader what is going to come in the report. And then finally, what we ask students to do in the introduction is establish criteria for investment. And by criteria for investment, we want students to reflect on the way they make their judgments. So not just the individual data, but what are the kind of broader reaching assumptions about companies and economics and the stock market that they're using in order to assess the company before them. And we ask the students to do this third because we don't want them to make decisions about what's going to be in the report too early. So we want them to write the analysis sections and then match the introduction to them rather than trying to shoehorn analysis sections into an introduction they've already written. The final really text-heavy thing that we work with the students on is their recommendation. Recommendation's fairly self-explanatory. This is where they state their recommendation. This is where they support their recommendation explicitly. And we ask them to do this last because students, particularly students who do companies that are well known, have a tendency to go in with preconceptions about what they're going to say about the company and what they're going to recommend. And we want them to hold off. We really want them to do the analysis and let the recommendation come from that. So we kind of hope to enforce that by having them write the recommendation later. The key skill we're looking for here is synthesis. The recommendation should really be a synthesis of the qualitative and quantitative analysis. And that culminates from the skills developed throughout the semester. The student's first assignment, first major paper in this class is a synthesis paper. So that's the level of critical thinking and critical writing we're really working with that. The final thing students write is an executive summary. And so of course it has to be last because you cannot summarize a report if there's not a report to summarize. Students don't often recognize this though, and because it's listed first, sometimes they want to do it first. This is a new and useful genre for students. It's something that many of them will have to write in their professional lives, but it's not a genre they're familiar with. It also continues developing their summary skills. We actually start the semester with summary, and so it has there's a nice circular feel to the course when students are continue to develop and apply those skills even at the end of the class. And so this company analysis has proven to be a really productive and interesting assignment, productive for students, often interesting for them because they can choose companies that they really care about, industries they really care about, and interesting for us as instructors to learn along with the students as we help them develop the skills. This assignment scaffolds very well with the class. It builds on writing skills that we've asked students to develop, and it also requires that they use the content they've been learning over the course of the semester. And finally, it really allows the students to develop important skills that apply not only in this class, but also will be applicable in their professional lives.
go away.
Setting down the paper.
Leigha, thank you so much. That was a really sort of wonderful and clear explanation of how you work students through this assignment. And so I have two questions for you. The first question is, at the very end you used the word scaffolding, and scaffolding is a term that in writing studies we use a lot. And can you say a little bit about what you mean when you say scaffolding, and then why it's such a valuable part of a writing curriculum and a business writing curriculum?
When I use scaffolding, particularly in relationship to this class, I mean that this assignment is the pinnacle of the things the students have been asked to do. And so literally we've been building a scaffold of skills and knowledge up to this assignment. So for instance, students have written summaries, students have written synthesis, students have written position papers where they specifically work on their argumentation skills, and all of those different writing skills are required in this section. Also, content knowledge is scaffolded up to this. So the frameworks, the analytical frameworks, the students are required to use in the qualitative analysis. Each of those frameworks is the subject of a separate lecture across the semester. Each of those is an analytical tool that the professor has emphasized for an hour and 15 minutes with them. So we're asking them to retain that. And then the financial ability to do financial analysis is also something that we spend only one class on, again, because we don't want to overemphasize it. But all of that content knowledge is also important in this assignment.
Great, thank you so much. And then the final question is a meta question.
Oh, no.
We have to end on a meta level, which is, why do you think writing and an emphasis on writing in the classroom and a WIG curriculum is so important for business students?
I have a lot of answers to that. I think a few key ones. One is that this is not something students are asked to do in business school, at least not the business school at George Washington. Others might be structured differently. Undergraduate business curriculum really stresses group work and group writing. But more so than the group writing, they stress the presentation that comes from the written work. And so what this does is it stresses individual writing so that students can develop those skills by themselves. They have an ownership of this. We've had students use this assignment as writing samples for jobs because it really is the only thing they've written by themselves that they can present to employers. On a larger level, if you look in the news every other day, there is a cry for employees who have better critical thinking skills, better synthesis skills, better communication skills, and all of the employers that these students are interested in working for value the business education that they're getting, but also want what I guess is sometimes dubbed these soft skills that we allow students to have. And this is really the only place in the business school currently where they develop those skills that employers really are looking for.
Thank you so very much. That was terrific. Thank you.